Nikola Tesla once said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Oh my god.
In this video, we will talk about what is the power of vibration, its use in ancient civilizations and the modern world, and how it can impact human health, behavior, and the entire universe. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to see our latest content. Without further ado, let's begin the video.
All of these tools you're seeing are literally the only examples of the types of known tools utilized by the ancient Egyptians that have ever been found. Just to clarify, these are not the only number of chisels or saws ever found, but they are the only types of tooling ever found to exist from the ancient Egyptians. That's right, and here's something else you need to know, is that out of the hundreds of thousands of hieroglyphics found throughout the land of ancient Egypt, not one single one of them shows anything about how the Egyptians cut or carved stone or constructed the pyramids. See, what happened is we were shown animations like these as children in school, not realizing that this is nothing more than some theorized drawing created only recently for school textbooks. A bunch of primitive dudes wearing nothing but loincloths, using soft bronze chisels to shape the stones that make up the pyramids of Egypt. But here's the reality of what happened when people actually tested these primitive alleged methods in modern times.
After days of work, their copper chisels and stone pounders are barely making a dent. Brown is wearing down tools at an extraordinary rate. The copper chisel the ancient Egyptians would have used lasts only a few dozen strikes.
That was a notable Egyptologist testing stone hammers and bronze chisels on limestone in an attempt to recreate the Sphinx's nose. So clearly not a feasible explanation, and what you didn't see is that later in this documentary, they completely gave up and resorted to using power saws to finish the task. But that was bronze chisels on limestone. Wait until you see what happened when he tried it on granite.
When Roger tries chisels made from bronze, the results are disappointing.
As you can see, we're leaving a lot of metal and very little stone is flaking out.
Yeah, so no. Obviously, bronze chisels were not the methods of tools utilized by the Egyptians or anyone.
Yes, if you came back in an hour's time, you would see about a 4mm drop down into the stone.
You're kidding, in an hour you'll be 4mm down?
Well, I've been doing a lot of experiments and I can guarantee that this will cut through the stone at about 4mm an hour. The sawing went wonderful once we switched over to using water with the sand. As you can see here, we achieved this in just a few days.
4mm an hour and just a few inches over a few days? Are you kidding me? So besides the fact that no saw of this size was ever found, nor was there any saw of this size ever found to be depicted by the Egyptians, but we can clearly see that this method is so unbelievably slow that it couldn't possibly be a feasible explanation for how the Egyptians cut and carved the millions of stones that make up the pyramids. Because keep in mind that the Great Pyramid of Giza is made of some 2.3 million stone blocks and was said to be constructed over approximately 20 years. That means that they would have had to cut, carve, move, and place at least one stone block every few minutes to achieve that timeline. And this does not include the many millions of more stone blocks that make up more than 100 other known pyramids found throughout Egypt. Many people are not aware of just how many Egyptian pyramids there are, and all of which were said to be done within a very specific timeline for their respective pharaoh, at least according to the alleged story that we've been taught in modern times. And I wonder just how many millions of blocks would make up that 118 pyramids, because of course they're all of differing sizes and dimensions. And this does not include the many millions of stone blocks that make up the dozens of various temples found throughout Egypt. This is just a few examples, all of which were made from countless stacked blocks. Nor does it include the countless flooring stones that surround these temples and the pyramids of Giza itself. Nor does it include the hundreds of various structures, including mastabas, all of which are made of stone blocks. Nor does it include the countless stones that make up the many columns found at dozens of sites throughout Egypt. Nor does it include the many gigantic stone obelisks, giant stone boxes, as well as the countless stone sarcophagi found all over the place, far more than could possibly be shared in this video. And nor does it include the thousands of incredible stone statues that have been found throughout the land of ancient Egypt. And it sure doesn't include all of the other random, incredibly shaped granite stones that were once part of structures that are long since gone. Impeccably curved granite that couldn't possibly be done with the known tooling found in Egypt, at least as far as what you've just seen. And you don't have to be a stonemason, archaeologist, or even a frickin' rocket scientist to comprehend that these tools here, copper saws and chisels, did not create the cuts of this level of precision, and this certainly does not even address the size of these stones and the time it would take to do it, which is of course a major factor that must be considered. However, what makes this particular stone box so unique is that it's listed as being discarded by the Egyptians, as on the other side you see that they made a mistake in the cut and it went off center. But this in itself is evidence that the Egyptians were not using some unbelievably slow, primitive handheld saw, because if that was the case, they would have noticed and corrected their mistake almost immediately. The fact that it continued off center for nearly another 3 feet strongly indicates that they were using a method that was far quicker and superior. The evidence is right in front of us. Like I always say, look and think for yourself. There are far too many details that weren't shown to us when we learned about the Egyptians as kids, but when you revisit this amazing topic as an adult with more life experience and the ability to use discernment, you can see just how real the mystery is. Yet despite all the details I shared in this video, many will still adamantly defend these debunked narratives.
When we look at the stones of the Great Pyramids, Stonehenge, and especially the sandstone and andesite stones of Pumapunku in Bolivia, with their clean, sharp cuts, we cannot help but think of how unlikely it is that it could have been achieved by copper and stone tools alone. These feats of sculpture and engineering seem to scream out for a far more sophisticated explanation, not recognized by mainstream academia. Even if basic tools could cut into such hard rock, how could such long cuts be made so precisely and with no deviation? In fact, we can achieve similar cuts today in hard rock as well as bedrock by using a device called a wire saw, as shown. Modern wire saws make use of motors, pulleys, and very long wires into hard rock. And because the wire has to be taut with tension in order to make these cuts, the wire will always be completely straight and will thus make completely straight cuts in whatever direction and angle they are positioned. We can see that the resulting cuts made by the modern wire saw look very much like those from ancient times. The edges of this cut are shown to be crisp and parallel, as if the tool were held completely steady. This particular cut was an overcut or accident, and is one of several, suggesting that the cutting technique was likely rather quick. The H-blocks of Pumapunku could also have been cut in this manner, as they are also described as being so identical, as if they had been cast from molds. However, one viewer was kind enough to point out that it would not have been possible to cut the H-blocks in this manner, as each H-block has a solid backing, which is a continuation of the rest of the block's body. Hence, some other technique would have had to have been devised in order to create these particular blocks. But could it have also been done in ancient times with a multiple wire vibratory wire saw? It certainly seems possible. But could the flow of water be converted into another form of energy? In the upcoming video, I will demonstrate how flowing water can be converted into powerful sonic vibrations.
In the 1960s, a Swiss physician named Hans Jenny built on Chladni's experiments to study vibrational phenomena, what he called somatics. He spread quartz sand on a black drum with a diameter of 60 centimeters, connected a tuner under the drum, and started playing the song, making the drum vibrate. As a result, he found the quartz sand showed different geometric images under different singing. If the singing is at a low frequency, the quartz sand forms a simple pattern of circles. As the frequency of the sound increases, the number of concentric circles in the pattern will increase. In 2019, Angelo's team published a paper saying that sound, like light, also has wave-particle duality. Just as the particles of light are photons, the particles of sound are called phonons, and phones also have mass. But this mass is different from what we usually understand. When phonons are pulled by gravity, they move in opposite directions. That is, phonons have negative mass, which repels gravity. Therefore, it will not fall under the pull of gravity, but will rise, and it has the characteristics of anti-gravity. Anti-gravity is the key here. But so far, Angelo's team has used sound to float a heavyweight object like a ping pong ball at best. The ancients seem to know more than today's scientists. In the 10th century AD, the Arab historian Al-Masudi wrote a story about an ancient secret he heard while visiting Egypt. Al-Masudi wrote how the pyramids were built. The builders first used a magic papyrus to press it under the four sides of the boulder to be transported, and then took a metal rod to hit the boulder, making a sound of a unique frequency. And then, an incredible scene appeared. The boulder began to levitate into the air, hovering at a height slowly. And then, the stick holder knocked on another stone, so that the stone was also suspended under the action of the sonic crane, so that the boulders floated up like soldiers and lined up in a row. Then tap again. The queue of boulders drifted forward slowly and regularly, as if they had received an order. The key to the whole process is that metal rod. Usually, the stick holder will let the boulders float to a position 45 meters in front of him and stop for a while. After that, it seems to check whether the boulders are neat, just like checking whether the placement of things on the conveyor belt on the production line is messy to ensure that the conveyor belt continues to function correctly. Then, the stick holder repeats the previous operation, knocking on the stone with a metal stick and giving orders until all the rocks have reached the designated position. It was not built by a group of sweaty slaves under the scorching sun, under the shouts of overseers with whips, using pulleys, levers, filling, and slopes, but in a mysterious ritual, in a very artistic way, holding a magical metal rod to command, and finally built the Great Pyramid. It isn't easy to find a reasonable explanation for this scene from the field of known science, but understanding this scene from the perspective of the newly emerging somatics is not entirely mystical. Sound particles have the characteristics of anti-gravity.
Since it can make a ping pong ball float, it can also make a boulder float, whether we can find a trick to use this energy effectively. A similar technique is recorded in the Old Testament, in the story of the Israelites destroying the walls of Jericho with the sound of trumpets. So, the city of Jericho 3,000 years ago was really solid. How then was such a fortified city to be breached? The Bible says that Israeli warriors marched out early in the morning, and at the back of the large army, the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant, the chest containing the tablets of the 10 Commandments. The specifications, dimensions, and materials of the Ark of the Covenant were specifically given by God and then made. In front of the procession carrying the Ark of the Covenant, 7 priests were holding horns. They sounded the trumpets, and the whole parade marched slowly around the city. During the entire process, no one spoke. Only the sound of the horn was sometimes low and sometimes loud. It makes the Jerichoans inexplicable. They have never seen such a war in their entire life. So, what are the Israelites doing? After the march, the Israelites returned to the camp to rest, and the day's action was over. In ancient and modern times and all over the world, there's only one case of attacking a city in this way. The Jerichoans, who were initially panicked, thought at this time that maybe the Israelites were either stupid or crazy. Others felt that it might be some religious ritual before the siege. Anyway, the Jerichoans could not understand the rules of the Israelites' faith, so they had to be on their guard. The following day, the mysterious Israeli army reappeared. The scene is moving forward slowly. The same priest, the horn, the Ark of the Covenant, and the same circle around the city. And just like that, the next day's military operation came to an end. It went on like this for 6 days, and the Jerichoans were numb to the Israelites' bizarre and ridiculous behavior. Then, finally, they thought that maybe Israelites had nothing to do with our impregnable walls, so they had to play tricks. On the 7th day, when the sound of the trumpets of the priests of Israel came from afar, the defenders of Jericho stretched and opened their sleepy eyes to see that the Israelites came out for a walk again today. They watched the Israeli procession pass under the city like a parade of troops. However, things are a little different today. This time, Israelites walked 7 times around the city walls. Then, when the priest's last trumpet sounded, all the Israeli soldiers suddenly let out a massive shout in an instant. The overwhelming sound made every Jerichoan's hair stand up, and they didn't expect such a scene. Immediately afterward, a dull, loud rumbling sound came from under his feet. The whole city seemed to be echoing the Israelites' cry, and it also made a low roar. Then suddenly, the city walls began to crumble, opening a few big holes. This is probably the only time recorded in history that a city has been knocked down with only sound. The following is how the History Channel interprets this age-old mystery. There are 12 gems on the priest's breastplate. When the incantation is chanted, the sound wave matches a particular frequency of the gems, and the gems emit light beams. This beam then activates an unknown mechanism within the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant amplifies the frequency of the horn sound. The role played by the gemstone here is similar to the mandala mentioned at the beginning. It has a corresponding relationship with a specific sound frequency, but the gemstone also plays another role here, which activated the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant played the role of the amplifier in the audio equipment, causing the building materials of the city wall and the horn's frequency to resonate, thereby destroying the city wall. Let's go back to the question posed at the beginning of this episode. The dynamic principle of modern aircraft is aerodynamics. So what is the dynamic principle of the ancient Indian aircraft Vimana? Perhaps the power comes from a unique sound frequency. Since the energy of sound can make boulders hang in the air, it can destroy solid city walls. And of course, it can also drive aircraft. Its corresponding pattern is mandala. Therefore, mandala is the verification code and switch to activate energy.
Can move in different directions relative to the position of the whole molecule. Atoms and molecules have energy, even at 0 Kelvin. This energy causes them to vibrate, among other things. Interactions between various components of the molecules, like nuclear repulsion, nuclear attraction, and electron repulsion, determine their motion. Each component has a finite amount of energy associated with it. Once you know the resonance frequency, you can amplify its waves to such a higher level that it will break or destroy the object. The power of vibration can be analyzed through cymatics, with just a vibrating plate forming patterns relative to the plate's geometry and the frequency of the vibrations. By changing the vibrations, these patterns change from unregulated chaos into symmetry. The universe is formed by light in the form of photon variations, with the absorption and emission of photon energy. Even without adding sound vibrations, the vibrations are always present in the form of photon oscillations, with a future unfolding with each new photon-electron coupling. It's because the universe is never at absolute zero. In the 1920s, an American scientist named Dr. Royal Raymond Rife developed a Rife frequency generator machine. The Rife machine produced low energy waves. These waves are also called radio frequency electromagnetic fields. They have low energy compared to X-rays or radiotherapy, which have high power. Today, using low energy waves as a treatment is less common, but there is some research on it. Dr. Rife experimented by introducing the BX virus into rats, which caused the rats to develop tumors. He was able to eliminate the tumors by exposing them to their MOR via his Rabian device. In 1934, a USC team of physicians led by Dr. Johnson transferred 16 terminally ill patients from a San Diego hospital to the Scripps estate in La Jolla, California. Here, they were subjected to the frequencies recommended by Dr. Rife for 90 days. Within 70 days, the USC team declared 14 patients clinically cured. The other 2 took 20 days longer. Associate professor and director of music at Skidmore College, Anthony Holland, a composer interested in the physical effects of sound, decided to learn the impact of audio frequencies in microbiology. Holland and his team searched for the exact frequency that would directly shatter a living microorganism. The magic number finally came from 2 inputs, high frequency and low. The high frequency had to be exactly 11 times higher than the low, which in music is known as the 11th harmonic. At this 11th harmonic, microorganisms begin to shatter like crystal glass.
If I tap this fork putting little pulses of energy into it. The second fork will also vibrate in sympathy. And if I silence this fork, we just may hear the other singing its tone. We say that I'm inducing a sympathetic resonant vibration in the second fork. It only works because both forks are tuned to the exact same frequency.
After practicing until they got efficient at the procedure, Holland began working with a team of cancer researchers to destroy targeted cancer cells. First, they looked at pancreatic cancer cells, eventually discovering these cells were specifically vulnerable between 100,000 and 300,000 hertz.
This results in an invitation to spend 4 months in a cancer research lab trying to shatter cancer cells. This is our setup in the lab. You can see the microscope with cancer cells on it. Here's the plasma tube, and here's my little frequency control box. So first we attack pancreatic cancer. Take a good look at this slide, because the next one will look quite different.
In repeated and controlled experiments, the frequencies, known as oscillating pulsed electric field technology, killed an average of 25 to 40% of leukemia cells, going as high as 60% in some cases. Furthermore, the intervention even slowed cancer cell growth rates by up to 65%. The team also found success in attacking ovarian cancer cells. Most recently, they tested the treatment against the deadly superbug MRSA, an organism resistant to many common antibiotics. Holland explains that thousands of people die yearly from MRSA, and the drugs usually used against the pathogen are known to have toxic side effects. Incredibly, the frequency therapy eliminated antibiotic resistance, and researchers were able to introduce a small number of antibiotics to kill the bug. Abdul Hassan Ali al-Masudi, an Arab historian from the 10th century AD, wrote about ancient Egypt and the methods he alleges they used to move massive stones, including those used to build the pyramids. He claimed that a magic papyrus imprinted with symbols was placed under each rock, after which a metal rod was struck against the stone to initiate the levitation process. According to al-Masudi, the stone would be guided along a fenced path with metal poles. Some believe these poles could have been used to create high-frequency sound vibrations, which would have been responsible for creating the levitation effects. Outside of this written testimony, which is open to interpretation, there is no direct evidence to suggest the pyramids were constructed by acoustic levitation. But the Great Pyramid of Giza possesses some extraordinary acoustic properties, demonstrating the capacity to amplify sounds generated at specific frequencies dramatically. The Egyptians who built the pyramids on the Giza Plateau knew a lot about sound, and knew how it could be used to produce powerful effects, possibly including levitation.
The Quetzal bird in ancient Mesoamerica was seen as the embodiment of the god Quetzalcoatl. Likely, one of the most notable ways for the ancient Maya to distinguish if they were in the presence was to listen for the call of the bird in which he embodied.
Here, the sound comes back.
This is the King's Chamber inside the Great Pyramid. Since we have it all for ourselves, we also experimented with our voices. It seems like this mysterious room is made to resonate with sound and vibrations. When you use your voice and hit the right tone, the entire chamber will start vibrating. This effect only works when there is 1, 2, or maximum 3 people in the room.
It's kind of a big secret. We know that NASA was down at Chichen Itza like 10 years ago and basically put a covered wall around the El Castillo, the main pyramid, so that they could do testing. And they were there for like almost a month, testing the frequencies apparently that are emitted from the pyramid there. That tells you something. Robert Barreros, in his book 2012, talks about the height of the Mayan culture and that at one point over 50,000 pyramids were active. They were pushing energy into the atmosphere.
What do you think of the whole Giza power plant theory?
I believe it. So the Nile used to run right up to the pyramids. Now, underneath the pyramid, we know that's true because we see the dried out aquifer areas where there's these gigantic shafts that run areas underneath the pyramid where the water would run. Now, when you take magnetized crystal granite, which is the base, and you use running water underneath it, you create physiostatic electricity. Then the granite will pull the ions up into the pyramid, send them up the Grand Gallery. Now, the Grand Gallery has these slots on each side where the hypothesis by engineers, mainstream engineers too, is that they could have been resonating rods, something to amp up, step up the electricity as it went up into the King's Chamber. In the King's Chamber, here's what's interesting. There's a box in there that they try to say it's a sarcophagus. It's not a sarcophagus. I'm 6'4". I can't fit in that box. Sarcophagus, when you go to the museum, you see what a real sarcophagus is. These things are massive, not this little tiny box. The box is the exact dimensions, though, of the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant used to sit inside of that box. It was technology. It was a capacitor. And that would then give the extra boost and send the electricity up through the apex where there was a gold capstone. The obelisk, which are magnetized crystal granite, would capture that ambient wireless electricity and then pass it on to what they call jed pillars, D-J-E-D, these jeds. They had these jeds. They're depicted in many hieroglyphs, people holding them and connecting them to light bulbs and electroplating devices in hieroglyphs, which I took everybody to go see.
Pause 1 second. What did you say was inside the box?
The Ark of the Covenant.
What is the Ark of the Covenant?
If you look into biblical texts, for example, there was this Ark that Moses stole. All right, he had this box. He claimed it was given to him by God, but I think he stole it from the Egyptians. This is why they fled after him.
An ark.
Yeah, so it's this box with these cherubims on it, but these cherubims are it's really a capacitor. It generates a lot of electricity. Inside of this box is something that has so much radiation that you had to have on specific type of clothing, which is well described even in the Bible. Rubber boots, gloves, this type of suit with this breastplate of metal on it. This is all to prevent the radiation poisoning. When somebody didn't have it on in the Bible and they touched the ark, they would become very sick. Their hair would fall out, their nose would bleed, their eyes would bleed, their fingernails would fall off. Radiation sickness. This thing was generating some type of radiation power, and it was connected to the Great Pyramid. It was in that box. Evidence for this, for me, that box has a gigantic piece of the granite missing off one corner, like an explosion happened from inside the box. If you look across the Grand Gallery, across the King's Chamber, there's a wall about maybe 30 feet away. The impact from that giant piece of granite that snapped off, it cut that granite on the wall the exact shape of that corner piece.
Wow.
Something explosive happened there. For you to throw a piece of granite that heavy, that far, and impact that way, so there was energy in there. Now, if you go back to the story of Moses, it really was Pharaoh Akhenaten. From now on, there'll be no other God but me. That made it into the Bible. I'm the only one and true God, and he began to do that. Then he made an order to go start defacing all the hieroglyphs and all of these statues around Egypt. That's why the noses and the ears are chipped off. That's why the faces are chipped off everywhere you go. Bodies are chipped away. It wasn't done. The hypothesis on the streets is that it was done because white people back then didn't want black people to know that there were black people in Egypt. That's actually false. The true reality is this was done in ancient times, and it was carried on by Coptic Christians long before Jesus was even born. They were still following that same monotheistic religion, and to them it was offensive to have these faces of all these gods around because it's only one true and only one God. But Moses, when he was kicked out, so they said, look, this guy has to go. We got to get him out of here. They kicked him out of Egypt. They kicked the Pharaoh out of Egypt. He went and he took that ark out of the Great Pyramid, and he fled with his new followers. They weren't slaves. They were followers of Akhenaten. They crossed the Sea of Reeds, not the Red Sea, which they tell you in the Bible. Nobody ever crossed the Red Sea. It's a mistranslation by accident on purpose.
The term that historically has been translated as Red Sea is Yam Suf. Yam means sea, however Suf does not mean red. The Hebrew word for red is Adom. Suf is typically understood to mean reed. Part of the reason for this is that the first occurrence of Suf in the Bible is in Exodus chapter 2, verse 3.
Right here where this valley comes out, there's a natural waterway. It's a dry riverbed. That is called a wadi, W-A-D-I. If you went into that wadi, you would find there are rocks all over the place, but they've all been pushed out of the way to make a path. Somebody pushed all the rocks out of the way to make a path for wagons, apparently. That dry riverbed, the wadi, ends up at that white dot, which you can barely see from this satellite map. That white dot is actually this giant beach. Off to the right, you can see where that wadi comes into it, that dry riverbed. And at the bottom of that beach, way down there, which would be the south end, at the south end, Ron Wyatt found this pillar. It had fallen down, half in the water. He and his sons dragged it out, scrubbed it off. A lot of it was eroded, but part of it was still readable. And it basically said something to the effect of, this pillar was erected by King Solomon to commemorate the crossing of the Red Sea. So they went and did some research. The National Geophysical Data Center in Boulder, Colorado has a map showing the depth of the water. How deep is the water? Above this red arrow, you can see where it says the Elan Deep, or Elat Deep. It's nearly 5,000 feet deep. The Gulf of Aqaba is. Incredibly deep water. South of there is the Aragonese Deep, which again is nearly 5,000 feet deep. Right where that arrow is, there's a shallow place. It's only 900 feet deep, which is still pretty deep. But 900 foot in 8 or 9 miles is a nice gentle slope down and a nice gentle slope up. Easy for wagons. There's an underwater land bridge right there. He says they walked across on dry ground, 900-foot wall of water on both sides. He went out to as deep as they could go, 100 feet or whatever, 150 feet with their scuba equipment, and found all along, as far as they could go, chariot wheels with no chariots attached to them. And chariot bodies crumbling badly, poorly conditioned, with no wheels on them. They found horse skeletons and human skeletons crusted over with coral. The chariot wheels, you can see one here in this picture, it's kind of hard to see, but it's gold-plated wood, but the wood has rotted out. There's only one Egyptian dynasty that used 4-spoke, 6-spoke, and 8-spoke, all 3 types used in this one dynasty. And all 3 are found down there, or something like that. If you look at the far right, this arrow is pointing to a mountain in Saudi Arabia called Jabal al-Laws, which means Mountain of Laws. It's been labeled that for centuries. Could Mount Sinai be in Arabia? Well, let's see what the Bible says. Galatians chapter 4. Which gendereth the bondage which is Agar, for this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. Hello, it's been there all along, folks. Why have they been looking in the Sinai Peninsula? That's not where it is. is a picture of the mountain that apparently is Mount Sinai. The top of it is still black. This may be the place where Moses got the Ten Commandments. At the bottom, you can see an altar with a calf on it. This may be the altar that Moses or Aaron set up. Okay. God told Moses to stand upon the rock. He said, "Thou shalt smite the rock, and water will come out that the people may drink." Of course, most Bible pictures will show a little stream of water coming out. How long would it take to water 2 million people plus their cows and sheep? How long? It'll take a little while, wouldn't it? This Bible picture shows a little bigger stream. Well, that's getting closer. Actually, this building is from a picture taken from a half mile away. This rock is as tall as a 5-story building. It is split right down the middle. Ron says this is the place, this is the rock that's split in half. And water came pouring out. You can see erosion marks. It'd be worth getting his video if you want to really study more on this, called the Evidences video or Discoveries. I think it is. Ron Wyatt Discoveries. Really good. He also found some strange things like Sodom and Gomorrah. The Bible says brimstone came down. This is a picture of solid ash cliffs. Apparently the city was burned so badly by these raining sulfur. Ron gave me, and I have right here behind the curtain, some of the sulfur balls. I've had several friends, even some scoffers, who said, "I don't think that's true." And they went over there to the place where Ron said they were, and they dug through the ash, and sure enough, there are literally millions of these sulfur balls. The outside is kind of a white. I know sulfur is yellow. I taught science, okay? If you scrape off this white coating, it's pure yellow sulfur, 99.6% pure sulfur. You can smell it for sure. Apparently, burning sulfur rained on the city. As the sulfur would burn itself out, it would encapsulate itself in its own ash and shut off its oxygen supply. Ends up with a coating around a pure sulfur ball. Found no place in the world except this place over there.
You can see from the picture that this is still the entrance of the city because you can still see desert plants, and we know from Deuteronomy that no grass or seed will ever take root there. Well, sure enough, as we entered the city, no grass or plants made their home there. You could even see more ziggurat-type structures at major intersections. But when I looked at this photo, I noticed in the background other symmetrical-type structures off in the distance, and nature just doesn't do that type of thing. All the walls of the valleys were decorated with this swirl-like pattern. It was beautiful to look at, like heat had melted different layers of rock and stone together. But beautiful as it was just dust and ash to the touch. I needed more evidence. I needed to find the sulfur balls that Ron claimed to be scattered all about. Sure enough, I found more than a dozen small balls of sulfur scattered about. This is what's left of my personal collection today.
Right now, just put a lighter to it and it'll burn until it's gone. Pretty neat stuff. We're going to set it on fire so everybody can see it burn. See it turning yellow, and it starts melting, turning black. Watch,
and
it's still burning. And pretty soon it'll start running down the wall.
Away from the Dead Sea, it is still possible to find today the remains and ruins of the destroyed cities described in Genesis 19. Archaeologists like Ron Wyatt and Jake Wilson have discovered evident man-made structures in the area in the 1990s. Formations such as ancient houses, gates, temples, statues can still be spotted in the area. As opposed to regular sulfur, this pale white form of sulfur can only be found in the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah. It cannot be found in any volcanic area or any mineral museum. Supporting the Genesis account, geothermal activity has never been recorded in the region, so these brimstones could not have come from a volcanic eruption.
Just one touch. I didn't even see the sulfur on my finger. It was indescribable.
And then when the Pharaoh realized the power source of Egypt had been stolen, the new Pharaoh, they sent the chariots after him and everything else. His son was left behind. He didn't want to go. That's Tutankhamun. But Tutankhamun, they started worrying that maybe when he got a little older, he would say, "I want revenge for my father." And so they decided to kill him and kill his girlfriend. And that's how the story ended that way.
So what was the purpose of this powerful ark?
When they were out there, they saw enemies were trying to attack them and use this thing as a weapon. It would send a beam out and kill these people. This is technology. And that's in the Bible.
Wow. That's fascinating.
And they recreated this at a university in America using the exact instructions that are in the Bible. Several people actually have done it as well, too, since then. It generated so much power, he had to shut it down. It was pulling power from everywhere.
If you look at the construction of the Ark of the Covenant, it is no more than a model for every capacitor made today.
whether it's a capacitor for lighting up street lighting or whatever. An insulated, double-plated box with a positive and a negative node at the top. That's it. That's all it is. And you look at the description of the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible, which is given twice. You take every measurement, you manufacture it with the materials that it says in accordance with everything it tells you, and you have a 100,000 volt immediate electronic capacitor.
I believe people...
The team believes the Ark charged itself when it was carried through the desert for weeks on end. They think the heat and the friction would have built up a huge charge inside the box. For trans of the two cherubim.
You don't want to touch it. Definitely do not want to go anywhere within feet of it, really, when it's arcing.
The experiment did seem to be a success. The Ark did charge up like a capacitor, and the cherubim did spark between their wings before bursting into flames.
So whenever a priest approached the Ark, he had to have a rope tied around his leg. This was in case the priest died. His body could then be dragged away from the Ark. There's even more evidence that the Ark was radioactive. In the book of 1 Samuel, the Philistines and Israelites were engaged in a fierce battle. The Israelites brought out the Ark of the Covenant, believing it would bring them divine protection and victory in the battle. But God didn't command this, so the Ark didn't work. The Philistines won the battle and took the Ark to their own city, Ashdod. As soon as the Ark arrived, people's skin became infected with painful tumors.
And it was so that after they had carried it about, the hand of the Lord was against the city with a very great discomfiture. And he smote the men of the city, both small and great, and emerods broke out upon them.
Emerods are tumors that sound a lot like radiation burns. Then illness swept through the city. That sounds like radiation sickness. The Philistines believed that the Ark was cursed and moved it to another city, Gath. But the tumors and sickness continued. Then they moved it to Ekron. The tumors continued. Finally, the Philistines sent the Ark back to the Israelites, along with gold and incense.
They sent therefore and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines, and they said, "Send away the Ark of the God of Israel, and let it go back to its own place."
When the Ark was traveling, it was set up in a portable sanctuary called a tabernacle. This was an elaborate tent made of woven fabrics and gold. The Ark was always shrouded. It was too dangerous to be gazed upon. When the Ark was returned from the Philistines, some men got curious and looked at the Ark when they weren't supposed to. 70 of them were struck down by the Lord. And there's a theory that the Ark used nuclear power, that it contained radioactive material such as uranium, which is found in the area. When uranium undergoes nuclear fission, it releases a massive amount of energy in the form of heat, light, and radiation. This energy can then be harnessed and used to power various devices or weapons. When the walls of Jericho came down, it was said to have been caused by the sound of the trumpets and the presence of the Ark. According to this theory, the Ark may have contained a radioactive substance that was triggered by sound waves that brought the walls down. The Ark remained a powerful symbol of the Israelites' covenant with God and their faith. The Ark was eventually moved to Jerusalem, where a temple was built. The Ark was then placed in the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of the temple. The Ark remained there for over 300 years, and it played a central role in Israelite religious life. And then suddenly, it's gone.
About to prove to you that all of the beasts, aka the ox, the lion, the eagle, and the seraphim that are spoken about in verses 1 through 8 appear in this seemingly simple pictograph behind me, but at the same time I am going to tell you that what you see behind you on the screen is part of the most complex pictograph that has ever been created throughout all of time and space, with 3,300 pictographs encompassed in a 3-inch by 6-inch piece of paper. No other piece of paper, artwork, or no other complex drawing on Earth is as complex as what you see before you on the screen.
Tourist, and you can now go there easily and see these places for yourself. Additionally, many artifacts and discoveries have been found in this area that give great evidence that this mountain is indeed the true Mount Sinai. Now, after the golden calf incident, when Moses returns back to the base of the mountain, it says in Exodus 32:20, what Moses did with this golden calf. It says, "Then he took the calf which they had made and completely burned it with fire and ground it to powder and scattered it over the surface of the water and made the sons of Israel drink it." At the base of this mountain, there is a stream which forms a small lake. So this place provides the water that would have been necessary for this event to have happened here. There are also around this small lake a number of wells that have been discovered as well. So this area was a main water source. A stream came down from the mountain here, and it was a main water source. There was another stream as well just to the north. So there was plenty of water in this area for these events to take place and for the nation of Israel to have used during their time at the base of Mount Sinai. Also, after the golden calf ordeal, God ordered the Levites to kill those who had been involved in the worship of the golden calf. In Exodus 32:28, we see that 3,000 died as a result. Now, with this being the case, there should be a mass graveyard site close by to this area. Interestingly, we find a site about 4 to 5 miles north that fits exactly this biblical event. There are thousands of standing stones that appear to have been used as grave markers in this flat plain. This area is also fenced off by the Saudi government and declared as an archaeological site. Also, close by to this mountain, there has been found a menorah painting which gives evidence that the Israelites were in this area. We also know that God gave to Moses, while they were at the base of Mount Sinai for about a year here, the design of the tabernacle, and that it was erected at the base of the mountain. Now, we don't have any evidence of this tabernacle as being here, as it was mobile in nature. However, by taking into consideration the location of the mountain and the lay of the land, there is a place here that would be the natural location for it to be. It is flat, close by to the altar of Moses, and at the base of the mountain. Now, the Bible mentions how the prophet Elijah traveled to Mount Sinai and stayed in a cave there after his powerful confrontation with the 850 false prophets of Baal and Asherah on Mount Carmel, as found in 1 Kings 19. At this confrontation, supernatural fire came down from the Lord and consumed the altar and everything on it. Then Elijah traveled to Mount Sinai and stayed in a cave. At this cave on Mount Sinai, God spoke to Elijah and strengthened him. Interestingly, on the side of this believed Mount Sinai is a large cave that perfectly matches Scripture and where Elijah could have stayed. This cave is known as the Cave of Elijah. It is also the only large cave in this area of mountains. There are also many other evidences that can be found around Mount Sinai that support it as the true location of Mount Sinai. Now it says in Exodus 15, it says, "Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 date palms, and they camped there beside the waters." And you can see in this video, this place has been found. This very place that it talks about has been found, and it supports the biblical text. To this day, there are many palm trees and exactly 12 wells here. This would have provided water and met all the needs of the Israelites. Here you can see this area with the palm trees and some of the wells. The Saudi locals in the area point out that this is Elim and has been known by this name as long as they can remember. After this, it says in Exodus 17, "Then all the congregation of the sons of Israel journeyed by stages from the wilderness of Sin, according to the command of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim. And there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, 'Give us water that we may drink.' And here is where Moses struck the rock, and water gushed out and came out from this rock." Now this rock that Moses struck and God split in two is believed to have been found and is a perfect match with the biblical account. It is massive in size and sits upon a small hill. It's also located in a large valley where the Israelites could have camped and can be seen from a long distance away. It shows water grooves in it where massive amounts of water ran down from it. And you can see this rock and the water channels and grooves that were made when the water gushed out from it. Now God confirms this in Isaiah 28:21. It says, "They did not thirst when he led them through the deserts. He made the water flow out of the rock for them. He split the rock and the water gushed out." And this is exactly what we see here at this large massive rock at Rephidim. Also, right by this massive rock at Rephidim, you can see what appears to be an altar that Moses erected after defeating the Amalekites and named it Jehovah Nissi, which means in Hebrew, "The Lord is our banner." Now there are also some other amazing discoveries in this area that are fascinating to see and give more evidence that this area was traversed by the Israelites. Ryan Morrow, who recently visited this area and produced an excellent documentary called Finding the Mountain of Moses, the real Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia, says some of the following information. He says the name of Rephidim means place of rest. Hebrew inscriptions that have been found in this area have been interpreted to say place of rest, the definition of Rephidim. Closer to the mountain, inscriptions have been found that Dr. Miles Jones, a scholar of ancient Hebrew, believes are talking about the battle with the Amalekites. He says one of the inscriptions refers to the death of an Amalekite. Nearby, there are two inscriptions that Dr. Jones believes are marking where a Hebrew mother and daughter died.
There is evidence for a whole new type of medicine in which DNA can be influenced and reprogrammed by words and frequencies without cutting out and replacing single genes. Gurdjieff and his team successfully transformed frog embryos to salamander embryos simply by transmitting the DNA information pattern through frequency alone. Gurdjieff's research group proved that with this method, chromosomes damaged by X-rays, for example, can be repaired. They even captured information patterns of a particular DNA and transmitted it to another, thus reprogramming cells to another genome. So they successfully transformed, for example, frog embryos into salamander embryos simply by transmitting the DNA information patterns. According to Russian researchers, our DNA is not only responsible for the construction of our body, but also serves as data storage and communication. The Russian linguists found that the genetic code follows the same rules as all our human languages. To this end, they compared the rules of syntax, semantics, and the basic rules of grammar. They found that the alkalines of our DNA follow regular grammar and have set rules just like our languages. So human languages did not appear coincidentally, but are a reflection of our inherent DNA. Dr. Lee Bartell, a professor emeritus of music and health and music education, is a leading researcher and expert on how our cells are affected by sound. He explores how sound can stimulate cells in your body and brain to reduce the impact of fibromyalgia pain, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and depression, and even increase blood flow. A common consumer vibroacoustic device is used to treat these health conditions. Researchers found that they could document brain cells firing at the frequency of the stimulus. Therefore, they could use a stimulus to bring about desired brain states, like delta sleep, which measures about 40 hertz. Today, physicists know that matter is made of energy and vibration because their experiments and research showed that matter is not solid. The more physicists look deeper into the matter, the more its solidity dissolves into energy and vibration. Even ancient scientists knew that matter was manifested through cosmic sounds or words.
In this experiment, I want to see if our thoughts can affect the world around us. You've probably heard people say that our thoughts shapes our reality, and it's this I want to put to the test. This experiment will show that thoughts are vibrations and have different frequencies, and thus affect our circumstances. The late researcher Dr. Masaru Emoto conducted a study lasting many years to see if human consciousness can affect the molecular structure of water. In his research, he exposed water to different words, pictures, and songs, and then froze the water to examine it with microscopic photography. The water exposed to positive speech and thoughts resulted in beautiful crystal formations, and the water exposed to negative speech and thoughts gave ugly crystal formations. Granted, his research has been criticized for both right and wrong reasons. Personally, I keep an open mind. Since rice absorbs water when you cook it, you can basically conduct the same research Dr. Masaru did. I approached the experiment by purchasing 3 brand new glass containers. I cooked some rice and added the exact same amount of rice in each container. And every day for about 2 months, I'd spend 60 seconds per container telling them either negative or positive things. The container marked love. I'd say nice things such as, "You're awesome," and "I love you." And to the container marked hate, I'd say horrible things such as, "You don't deserve to live," and "You make me sick," and "Go and kill yourself." And the container marked ignore, I'd do just that. It's been about 9 weeks now, and it's finally over. And I'm happy to tell you that it's a success. Alright? And this is what happened. Alright, so the container marked with love it's in quite good shape. And the container marked hate it's in bad shape, alright? This is quite disgusting. There's no way I would even touch this. The container marked ignore it's in better shape than the container marked hate, but it's still quite disgusting. It just proves to me that our thoughts is not just an interior force, but also an exterior force. Our thoughts gives out some kind of energy, vibrations, when we think about something, and it goes outwards. Now, you might think that there's room for coincidence, but this works every time. If you want to try it yourself and narrow down your odds, try using 25 containers, or even 50 containers. This works, and it shows that our thoughts literally shapes our life. It all starts in your mind.
This experiment proves that the words we say and the thoughts we think in our head can physically manifest over time. Listen to me when I say that your words hold more meaning than you will ever know. What we say to others, what we say in our own heads, your whole environment is affected by your words.
Mentioned on the new Joe Rogan podcast with RFK Jr., and it relates to timeline of illness related to technology, not germs. Now, what's interesting is this comes from the book The Invisible Rainbow. It talks about how in 2020, remember everybody was experiencing loss of smell, loss of taste, hair loss. Those are all symptoms of radiation poisoning. Now, what's fascinating is every single time a new form of technology rolled out, people started experiencing flu-like symptoms, influenza from the atmosphere, which is being electrified. You have 1889, the first rollout of the power lines, same symptoms. 1919, rollout of the radio, same symptoms. But what's most interesting is in 1933, there was a military experiment done called the Lancaster study, where they took people and they put them in a quarantine setting and had them cough and spit all over each other, and none of them got sick. So maybe it's time to look at the technology, not the germ.
All right, the official explanation for today's COVID-19 pandemic is a dangerous infectious virus. This is the rationale for isolating a large portion of the world's population in their homes so as to curb its spread. From face masks to social distancing, from antivirus antivirals to vaccines, these measures are predicated on the assumption that tiny viruses can cause serious illness and that such illness is transmissible person to person. It was Louis Pasteur who convinced the skeptical medical community that contagious germs cause disease. However, he eventually admitted that the whole effort to prove contagion was a failure, leading to his famous deathbed confession that the germ is nothing, the terrain is everything. While the incidence and death statistics for COVID-19 may not be reliable, there is no question that many people have taken sick with a strange new disease, with odd symptoms like gasping for air and fizzing feelings. And hundreds of thousands have died. Many suspect that the cause is not viral, but a kind of pollution unique to the modern age, electromagnetic pollution. On September 26, 2019, 5G wireless was officially turned on in Wuhan, China, and officially launched November 1, with a grid of about 10,000 base stations, more 5G base stations than exist in the whole United States, all concentrated in one city. A spike in cases occurred on February 13, the same week that Wuhan turned on its 5G network for monitoring traffic. Illness has subsequently followed 5G installations in all the major cities in America and throughout the world. Since the dawn of the human race, medicine men and physicians have wondered about the cause of disease, especially what we call contagions, numerous people ill with similar symptoms all at the same time. Could a packet of RNA fragments, which cannot even be defined as a living organism, cause such havoc? Perhaps something else is involved, something that has upset the balance of nature and made us more susceptible to disease. Perhaps there is no coronavirus at all. Cowan and Fallon Morrill argue that the causes of disease are poisons, including EMF poisons, and nutrient deficiencies. Until we focus our attention on the true causes of illness, we will not make any progress in restoring health. Or what role viruses play, rather. Is there within that exosome? And the example that they use in the book is that they're like a firefighter. So you think of a virus as a firefighter. It shows up to put out a fire and to be a part of that process, to help detoxify, rather than being the actual cause of the fire. Right? The way that exosomes, when our body gets rid of these exosomes, they communicate through resonance with other people. So I guess the best example of that is that there are non-physical means of communication that people can have and that organisms can have. So the best example of that I know is when a lot of women live together, they sync. I think that's the correct term, my girlfriend.
If you still don't believe in the 5G conspiracy, please watch this. Speedtest.net. Many of you know this website. I literally just went to look at the speed of my internet, and I stumbled across this by accident. Discover your nearest 5G deployment. It's a map of the entire world and all the 5G networks. Now watch. Here's a quick COVID update. USA has now more than doubled second place. If you take a look at the heat map for USA, you'll notice everything is happening on the east side of things, mainly New York City. Other than that, second place is California. This is a world map of all the 5Gs that have been deployed all over the world. USA has 5,500, while the rest of the world don't even equal 3,000. New York alone has a radius of about 1,500 deployed 5Gs, and California is second with almost 350. Follow and share this as I do the exact same thing and break down each country. 5G is what's killing us. Part 2, Mexico and South America. Mexico has a population of over 130 million people. This is a COVID heat map of Mexico. Nothing is going on. Out of 130 million people, they only have 1,500 cases. Well, why? Could it be because they don't have any of the 5G networks that have been deployed all over the world? Zero. Brazil, more than 210 million people. Brazil is leading South America in most cases, but they only have 8,000. To put that into perspective, Canada has more cases than Brazil and Mexico combined. Brazil has 5 deployed 5G networks. The rest of South America doesn't even equal 10. Pretty self-explanatory. 188 5G deployed networks in Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic combined. Does that make any sense? Share and follow to see part 3. 5G is what's killing us. Part 3. Europe. In the top 13 countries with the virus, 10 of them are European. Why? Well, second to America, the small little pocket of Europe has over 1,200 deployed 5G networks, all within a small radius. If you zoom into Europe, you will see right in the dead center of Europe, almost 700 5Gs have been deployed. Do you remember where the outbreak started in Europe at rapid speeds? In northern Italy, just south of Switzerland. Attached to this map is an actual Twitter feed from the people who made this website. And if you zoom in here, on July 25th, 2019, Italy was one of the first European countries to get 5G. Countries like France, Germany, Spain, and Finland all got it 1 week before that. Part 4 in the next video. 5G is what's killing us. Part 4, Africa. If you take another glance at the heat map of the world for the COVID coronavirus, you'll notice that Africa is barely touched. Also important to note that Africa, as of 2016, has 1.2 billion people. I know what you're going to say. Hot places are not getting the virus. Hot places are not spreading. Okay. Then explain this. Out of all of Africa, the place with the most cases is the country furthest away from all the action. South Africa. They have the most cases with under 1,500. Now take a wild guess which African country has the most 5Gs deployed. Yup, you guessed it, South Africa. Climate and temperature is not the common denominator. Check out part 5, listen to this one. It is well-known information, and most people know that Wuhan is the first city in the world to roll out a 5G internet tower and antenna network. It is also the first city in the world to experience the COVID coronavirus epidemic. Now for what I find most interesting. India not only shares a border with China, they have the exact same population, but they don't even have more than 3,000 cases. 1.4 billion people and not even 3,000 cases. Now guess how many 5G networks India has? They have zero 5G networks. That's why.
Another creation credited with acoustic levitation is the Coral Castle located in Florida. The Coral Castle is a sprawling stone compound built by Edward Leedskalnin between the years 1923 and 1951. The complex is constructed of nearly 1,000 tons of rock, which Leedskalnin somehow cut, shaped, lifted, and maneuvered into place, all by himself. Just him. FYI, he was 5 foot tall and weighed 100 pounds.
Ant-Man!
I ruined the moment, didn't I?
Leedskalnin refused to allow visitors or observers on site while he was working, so there are no eyewitness accounts detailing his construction methods. Yet, alone, working mostly at night, he was somehow able to cut and transport 1,000 tons of rock to use for walls and towers. He also built all kinds of buildings and sculptures, all from giant pieces of stone. An obelisk he raised weighs 28 tons, and the largest rock on the property weighs an estimated 35 tons. Now, some of these stones are twice the weight of the largest blocks in the Great Pyramid of Giza. All this he did alone and without heavy machinery. The most amazing thing to me is the stone gate. It weighs 9 tons and has about 1/4 inch of clearance inside the frame. It's so well balanced that you could push it open with a single finger. This is something that would be challenging for even the most experienced engineering and construction team, yet somehow Leedskalnin was able to do it alone.
Oh, this guy definitely wasn't union.
Nope. Leedskalnin never specifically identified sound as a key factor in his work, but he had an interest in radio and owned all kinds of sound equipment which he used for unknown purposes. Now, no one ever saw him lift enormous objects, though the story goes that spying teenagers saw him float coral blocks through the air like hydrogen balloons.
I love this guy.
I do too.
I have discovered the secrets of the pyramids and have found out how the Egyptians and the ancient builders in Peru, Yucatan, and Asia, with only primitive tools, raised and set in place blocks of stone weighing many tons.
He told friends ancient masters had developed a method for overcoming the force of gravity, and that as a practicing Freemason, he was exposed to this knowledge through his contacts in that secret organization.
This guy built an Illuminati sandcastle with magnets?
He might have, with magnets or sound or both. I mean, there's actual science behind some of this. Here's another. Namadal is an archaeological site on the island of Pohnpei in Micronesia, and it's been called the Machu Picchu of the Pacific. It's the only ancient city ever built upon a coral reef, and the engineering of Namadal is so complex, nobody can figure out how it was built. The lost city dates back to around 200 BC, and it's made up of hundreds of stacked stone logs, each about 3 meters long and about 1 meter in diameter. The logs, which are stacked kind of like firewood, create walls that are 40 feet high and 18 feet thick. That's taller than a 3-story building, yet each stone log weighs about 2.5 tons. And the logs that make up the high walls, they weigh as much as 50 tons each. How they were moved and lifted into position is absolutely baffling. The locals didn't have pulleys, they didn't have levers, they didn't even have access to metal. This is Stone Age technology, so how did they do it? Well, the locals tell stories about giants who flew great canoes in the sky.
Aliens.
And those aliens, I mean giants,
Yaha!
use some kind of magic to levitate the logs into place. Now, these are structures from very different and diverse cultures from all over the world. What was their secret? Well, these societies are so old that there is no record of how these structures were constructed. But in almost every culture where megaliths exist, a legend also exists that the huge stones were moved by sound, either by striking with a rod to produce acoustic resonance, or by instruments, or by simply chanting stones into position. Let's see how that works. For centuries, travelers from the Far East told tales of acoustic levitation. So now that we've seen that sound can be used to move objects, is this enough evidence to prove how the pyramids were constructed? For some people, yes. For most, no. For me, I'm not really sure. Could the pyramids have been constructed using pulleys, ramps, and cranes, like mainstream Egyptologists claim? Well, sure. But when you look at the sheer size those ramps would need to be, and the distances involved, the amount of materials required to build the scaffolding would be more than the material in the actual pyramids. Much more. So where are all the construction materials? To me, there seems like there's something going on here, but we can't even talk about this without being labeled kooks. Any challenge of established scientific dogma is labeled pseudoscience. Isn't that a bit arrogant? I mean, isn't pseudoscience only pseudoscience until it's actual science? But people are afraid to go up against the establishment.
I am going to leave you speechless right now, because if you go on Google and you type in the speed of light, you get this number. So watch what happens when you put this number on Google Earth. Before you say, that's just a coincidence, did you know that the Great Pyramid is almost perfectly aligned to what is called true north? Even more so than the attempt that modern-day scientists made when they built the Paris Observatory. But what makes this even more shocking is when you remember that this ancient group of people who built the Great Pyramid had no compass. Still think it's a coincidence? Well, did you know that the Great Pyramid's sides are on the exact line of the equator? And the three pyramids of Giza are perfectly aligned to match the belt of Orion. When you look at all the facts, it doesn't take a genius to understand that whoever built the most accurately aligned structure on Earth was not a simple people group using primitive methods, but incredibly intelligent workers, sustained by some hidden insight. And personally, I'd say I'm about 99% sure I know who built the Great Pyramid. You already know that even the most advanced technology couldn't replicate the pyramids. You already know that the structure and location is even more precise than our finest modern-day buildings. You already know that the pyramids are perhaps the most perplexing things on Earth. And so when we look at all of the dimensions, at all of the alignments, we cannot simply say that this is just a pure coincidence. That's why when we add all of this together, it's not completely balmy to believe that we are dealing with some kind of lost civilization who are harnessing a lost technology. But of course, this is only believed by people with an incredibly low IQ, right? Well, have you ever heard of this guy before? Nikola Tesla, the man responsible for 80% of the technology we use today, including X-ray, radar, laser, and radio. Tesla believed that the Earth was a giant electrical generator and that we could use the planet with its poles to conduct wireless electricity. You probably thought that wireless electricity was a new technology, but all the way back in 1893 at the World's Fair, he shocked everyone by holding an isolated light bulb in his hand, and he lit it naturally using the free electricity that runs through the Earth. So take all of that into your mind, take a deep breath, because I'm going to introduce you to the plot twist of the century. Because of Nikola Tesla's work, this is why quite literally millions of people believe that the ancient pyramids are not tombs, but power plants emitting wireless technology. Hey, don't say I didn't warn you. I did say this was going to get controversial, and I've still got to tell you who I think made the Great Pyramid. But first, look carefully at this Egyptian ankh, and then compare it to Tesla's oscillator. Now check out these ancient Egyptian carvings, and notice what is it that this mysterious thing is holding. It looks like a wire and a bulb. But get this, in 1934, these three artifacts were found together in one of the pyramids. A ceramic pot, a tube of copper, a rod iron which contained a liquid acid, and all of these combined can be used to create a chemical reaction which produces electricity. Remember earlier how I told you that there was another theory for why there was water beneath the pyramids? Well, these same people who believe that these pyramids are energy sources, they believe that physioelectricity could be controlled by using the water from the Nile that runs beneath these pyramids. Look carefully at these sarcophaguses. These were clearly built into the pyramid as they were so large that you cannot move them. In fact, Egyptologists, they believe that they were bull coffins, but those who believe this same theory say there's no way they were bull coffins. No, these are battery boxes. And in fact, in 2011, when a camera went inside one of these rooms, they found a large copper wire, and these same people claim that the hieroglyphics on the wall were showing some kind of wiring diagram. Whether you buy into these speculations or not, no one can deny that the genius Nikola Tesla was fascinated by the Great Pyramid and its potential to produce limitless energy. He even imitated the structure by building his own electromagnetic pyramid called the Warden Cliff Tower. This utilized the Earth's resonance, creating wireless energy. Tesla even said that he used it to wirelessly transmit pictures and sounds, but sadly, Tesla wasn't taken very seriously. And not only did many rip off his ideas, but in 1915, he ended up bankrupt with little reputation, and his transmitter tower was eventually destroyed by the authorities, who were very suspicious of its capabilities. You know exactly what I'm going to say next. Do you think that these pyramids were in fact power plants? Well, I'm going to tell you what I think they are after we meet our final candidate. Number 4. the Israelites. There are two schools of thought on this. The first one is this: we know that before the Exodus, before God freed the people of Israel from Egypt, we know that Pharaoh had put them under intense labor. They were building something for him. The Bible says, so the same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people and their officers, saying, "You shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks as before. Let them go and gather the straw for themselves." So could it be that the Israelites are the ones who built the pyramids? After all, it's been estimated by biblical scholars that there were nearly 2 million Israelites who were living in Egypt before the Exodus. So that would certainly be enough manpower to build these incredible structures. But as you can imagine, this view has received a lot of backlash, with arguments like the craftsmanship, the precision and the art which took place on these pyramids could not have been done by those under forced labor. No, this was the work of passion and love by the most talented individuals in the land. But if we look at biblical history, this argument can actually be easily rebutted. Whenever God's people put their hand to a task and the Lord was with them, they prospered. King David never lost a battle. Daniel and his friends became the highest achievers in the land when they were under captivity. And when God's sacred ark was in the house of Obed-Edom, he saw nothing but success in all of his endeavors. So if God's people truly did build the pyramids, I personally believe that you would expect to see nothing but the highest level of excellence. However, the real reason that many people, including Christian scholars, discount the Israelites as the builders of the pyramids is because the dates are completely different. You see, the Great Pyramid, according to Egyptologists, was built around 2500 BC, whilst the Israelites' exodus from Egypt was much later, in the year 1400 BC. But again, I would argue that this isn't a game changer either. You see, Graham Hancock and his crew claim that the Great Pyramid is much older than 4,500 years old, whilst others go the opposite way and say no, it's even younger than the original 2500 BC date, because the carbon dating test that was done in 1984 was wrong. You see, a more recent test was done in 1995, and they stated that the first test was off by nearly 2 centuries. And not only this, the Egyptians were known for reusing their resources, so the wood and other resources that were tested could actually be much older than the pyramid itself. But the second school of thought is that the Israelite Joseph from the Bible is the one who orchestrated the building of these pyramids. And this is where the American politician Ben Carson was mocked profusely for holding this kind of view.
My own personal theory is that Joseph built the pyramids in order to store grain. You know, it would have to be something awfully big. When you stop and think about it, I don't think it would just disappear over the course of time to store that much grain.
Okay, so as I pointed out, Mae, that was 1998, but he was asked about this recently.
It's still my belief, yes. Can you explain that a little bit more? Yeah, well, the pyramids were made in a way that they had hermetically sealed compartments. You wouldn't need hermetically sealed compartments for a sepulcher. You would need that if you were trying to preserve grain over a long period of time.
But come on, is it really that illogical to hold such a position? Well, Ron Wyatt certainly provided some very interesting evidence which should be included in our discussion. The Bible says, "So he," that is Joseph, "gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities. He laid up in every city the food of the fields which surrounded them. Joseph gathered very much grain as the sand of the sea, until he stopped counting, for it was immeasurable." Ron Wyatt noticed that at the Saqqara complex there were 11 large pits, which the Egyptians had no explanation for. But it was noted that when these pits were excavated, bits of grain were discovered. Each pit was connected by chutes, and there was only one entrance to the grain pits, and you had to go through this complex to get there. Ron believed that this could have possibly been a place to sell grain to those who came to Egypt during the 7 years of hunger, and that men would have sat in these cubicles with small tables to sell grain. Ron also engineered a possible replica of the machinery that could have been used to build the pyramids. He did this after observing hieroglyphics and discovering these large timber handles that were put into storage at the History Museum in Cairo. But I can hear exactly what you're thinking right now. You're saying to me, is there any evidence that Pharaoh had a chief advisor, a prime minister who managed the people through these 7 years of adversity? Well, when I show you this, it's going to blow your mind. This is an ancient Egyptian stele. It's 8 feet tall, and on it gives the details of a historical account of when the Nile stopped flooding. And so because of this, the people experienced a period of 7 years of hunger because they could not grow any crops. I wonder, does that sound familiar to you? So, the pharaoh of the time, Joseph, called upon a gifted young man called Imhotep for guidance. Imhotep found solutions for the hunger problem and was thus appointed as Pharaoh's chief advisor, the second most powerful man in the land after Pharaoh Joseph. Again, does that sound familiar to you? Imhotep was quite literally one of the most intelligent human beings who has ever lived. He was the first architect who built the first pyramid, which was the largest structure in the world at the time, reaching the heights of 225 feet. He was also an astronomer. He interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, and he was also a brilliant physician who wrote the earliest medical text called the Edwin Smith Papyrus. Again, Does that sound familiar to you? Let's be honest with one another. This person, Imhotep, sounds an awful lot like the Joseph of the Bible. And I know
that they found proof that the Bible's true inside of the Great Pyramids. It contains one entrance with a broad way leading down to a pit. But you can take a narrow road leading to the King's Chamber, which sounds familiar. If you take the narrow way, there's 153 steps going up to the gallery. Just like the 153 fish that Peter caught after Jesus appeared to them at his resurrection. The King's Chamber is on the 50th layer of stones, just like according to the Hebrew calendar, the 50th year is the year of Jubilee. Inside of that chamber, you encounter nothing but an empty tomb. So once you're in the King's Chamber, there's an empty tomb. The Great Pyramid was originally encased with 144,000 casing stones, just like 144,000 mentioned in Revelation. The top of the Great Pyramid was actually never put in place. It would actually be called the cornerstone. Jesus said he was the cornerstone, and the stone that the builders rejected became the cornerstone. Subscribe now for more biblical proof.
Is this the location where the fallen angels landed when they fell from heaven? Watch this.
Interesting facts. Mount Hermon, the highest United Nations base in the world, sits on the peak of Mount Hermon, which is where the fallen angels landed according to the Book of Enoch. This is where the UN got their color blue from, as fallen angels were also Hindu gods, which were blue. In year 1666 of all years, Louis XIV of France declared the meridian points, where 33.33 degrees east by 33.33 degrees north of the equator sits Mount Hermon. Keep in mind, a third of the angels fell from heaven, or 33.33. Also, 33 is an important number in Freemasonry. It's also interesting that Hermon means forbidden place in the Encyclopedia of Britannica.
Subscribe.
Of course, we know this story of the fallen angels creating giants in Genesis 6:4, but in Joshua 12, verse 4 through 5, we're told about King Og, who was a giant, and how he is connected to Mount Hermon. It says the other king was Og, king of Bashan, and his territory, who was of the remnant of the giants, who dwelt at Ashtaroth and Edrei, and reigned over Mount Hermon. So here we have the Bible as well as the Book of Enoch telling us that the region of Mount Hermon was occupied by giants. Enoch 15, 8 through 9, and now the giants who were born from the body and flesh will be called evil spirits on the earth, and on the earth will be their dwelling. And evil spirits came out from their flesh, because from above they were created, from the holy watchers was their origin and first foundation. Evil spirits they will be on the earth, and spirits of the evil ones they will be called. But first we have to understand the importance of Mount Hermon and Jesus' transfiguration. It seems as if Jesus went right into enemy territory when he went to Mount Hermon and declared his authority. This seems to be the location where Jesus had his transfiguration, and actually even more importantly, this is the location where Jesus revealed to his disciples that he is the Messiah. Caesarea Philippi was a city that was located near the base of Mount Hermon. This history is how the Inca inherited the megalithic structures left from the fallen angels, their offspring the giants, and whatever group of people were living with them at the time. The Inca people, through passed down oral tradition, even admit that these ancient megalithic structures seen within and around Cusco are not the doings of the Inca people, but was actually inherited by them when they came into the region. The possibility that ancient native people built these structures with their massive size and laser precision is impossible. I look to the supernatural explanation of Genesis 6:4 for understanding. The Bible verse that describes fallen angels and their offspring the giants alive and living among people during Earth's earliest days. Here are some of those supernatural examples. This wall within the city of Cusco is called the Roca Wall. We see the megalithic stones that look like they were molded into place, that even a human hair couldn't fit in between. We then see the Inca building techniques. You can see it's almost like they tried to copy the previous megalithic techniques with some of the perfect placement stones, but it's nothing like the previous precision of the megalithic structures. We then see the Spanish colonial building techniques that have a lot of mortar and look really sloppy. Again, mainstream archaeology claims this to be the work of the Inca, but the Inca people even say themselves they didn't build these megalithic structures, but inherited them. In this picture from the 1930s, you can see the megalithic wall with then an additional building around it in the classic Inca style, indicating that they found the structures when they moved into the region and then built off and around it. After all, why would they move from the incredibly safe and strong megalithic building style to the technique of just stacking stones? This picture shows the clear difference between fallen angel understanding, techniques, or technology, and the building of ancient people living during that period. Just north of Cusco is a site called Ollantaytambo. This site has what, interestingly enough, looks like a staircase for giants. We also see many structures there that were clearly built by Incan people, but at the top of the giant staircase, we see what's called the Temple of the Sun, which is a megalithic structure comprised of 6 50-ton stones. These stones are made of red porphyry that is too hard of a stone to be crafted with the tools that the Inca had at the time, just like all the other previous locations with megalithic stones. The quarry for these stones is also known to be 4 miles away. Even today, crafting and moving these massive stones would be an incredible feat. It's impossible to imagine such an act being done with just ropes and people. Sacsayhuaman on the northern outskirts of Cusco is one of the most impressive megalithic sites on Earth. The massive size of the stones here, with their precise placements and laser precision, is another example of impossible building techniques for ancient people. These stones once again look as if they were molded into place. The ancient people alive back then weren't filing these massive stones. They once again didn't even have the types of tools needed to do such a thing, and the stones don't have any signs of tool markings on them. The largest stone blocks at Sacsayhuaman are over 28 feet high and weigh around 120 tons. One of the stones on the outer wall is so precise that it has 12 precise cuts to fit in perfectly to match with 12 other stones. Quinco is a site near Cusco. This site is pretty incredible because it looks like the shape was just pulled right out of the natural stone with laser precision, perfect angles, no deviation. The Inca at the time had bronze tools, way too soft to even work on this type of stone. They had not learned to work with iron yet. Similar to the other sites in and around Cusco, there are no tool markings on any of the stone cutouts.
Ethiopian Christians looking for evidence of God will point you in the direction of the 11 churches of Lalibela, which are carved into the mountains of the country, and are each formed from one singular block of granite. Modern-day experts believe that even creating one such church would take a workforce of 40,000 people several years, but the Ethiopians insist they were carved by angels overnight. But human hands could have worked so delicately without leaving a trace of the labor. The temples feature irrigation systems to deal with the runoff of rainwater, and boreholes in the rock that are so smooth they appear to have been drilled. But such feats were way beyond the capabilities of what we know of humankind when the site was built 3,000 years ago. Even after all these years, it is impossible even to drive the point of a needle between the perfectly secured stones. You can't even say that of most structures built in the present day. Who lived before the Incas and had such mastery of masonry?
Is the Trilithon at Baalbek in Lebanon. And these stones, these massive stones used as the foundation, weigh around 900 tons. I mean, the cranes today would have trouble moving these stones even today, but they were somehow lifted and perfectly placed on top of another foundation of stones that weigh around 400 tons. Absolute impossibility with manpower and ropes. The full picture is clear. This is the only explanation as to how these ancient sites of Cusco, Peru were built. This region absolutely had fallen angels and giants within it within Earth's earliest history. Not far from Cusco, Peru is Tiwanaku, which has incredible megaliths as well. Peru also holds the Nazca lines, which are images that are only seen clearly from the sky, tying these entities to their ability to be in the air, which for me is one of many, many reasons to tie them to the current UFO and UAP phenomenon. These entities' ability to be in the air may also explain how they were able to move such massive stones long distances, or even how they were able to move them at all. The full picture starts to be seen when we look at the biblical text referring to Earth's earliest days, coupled with the fact that at the same time, different cultures worldwide reported giants and have megalithic structures built. This is between groups of people who had no contact with each other. The point of contact that was made between these different groups of people were the fallen angels who were mingling with men. That's how we see this worldwide connection.
Did fallen angels build the ancient pyramids? Pyramids from across the world showcase astonishing similarities without the ancient civilizations having any contact with each other. Some believe it's the work of aliens. Could it be divine intervention instead? Genesis 6:1-4 speaks of these angels having sex with women of earth and giving birth to giants known as Nephilim. Could these structures be the work of these angels and their offspring? It remains a speculative link between biblical texts and ancient architecture.
There are plenty of books on the topic. Technology of the gods, showing what appears to be, from Egyptian hieroglyphics, them working with electric eels, producing electricity somehow. How did they know about electricity 4,000 years ago? Out of place, out of time and place. There are hundreds of books, this one in Spanish, about the Ica stones. Carved on one of the Ica stones is what appears to be a fella from 700 or 800 years ago with a telescope, looking at a comet or something. They have pictures on the Ica stones from 700 or 800 years ago of people doing brain surgery. How did they know? There are books like Mysteries of the Unexplained with all kinds of interesting things. And the conclusion of these are mysterious creatures that are found. But I think if you look at it from a biblical perspective, they could have known all kinds of things and passed that knowledge on to their kids, including to Noah and his family. After the flood, they would have passed that information on to who knows who. And probably most of this things we have in the last 4,000 years are actually rediscoveries, not discoveries of technology or ancient secrets. Somebody already knew this, and the knowledge was lost. So modern man is simply reaccumulating some of the things that were lost from 4,000 years, like the Antikythera device found in the Aegean Sea, I believe it was, by Greece, that appears to be a calculator from 2,000 years ago.
It's either aliens or fallen angels. Those are the only explanations, with so many cultures with no contact with each other doing the exact same things. And how can we know that the aliens are an evil spiritual phenomenon? Well, if you go to alienresistant.org, a website that sadly doesn't look like it's been updated like at all in the past few years, but there is still a pretty large number of testimonies on here of people who have called on the name of Jesus during their alien abduction, and these entities flee. So these same star gods, these same gods from the past, these extraterrestrials from other planets, from Nibiru, these things are coming into people's rooms, harassing people, taking them on ships, but then when people decide to call on Jesus during these experiences, they stop. So this proves that it's a spiritual phenomenon, absolutely 100%. But for some reason, these entities, they're of a fallen nature, they are 100% under the authority of the spiritual realm. And so when you call on Jesus to these beings, they flee, proving in my eyes that these same entities that came, these ancient astronauts that came in the past to build the ancient structures of Earth and to teach these different things really weren't extraterrestrial. They were cast out of heaven and sent to Earth, and they corrupted mankind. They came before the flood and after that, like told to us in Genesis 6, and they very well will be coming again in the last days.
But I can stand here and say that my husband, my daughter, and my son have not had any more experiences since I became a believer and gave it to him.
But strangely enough, whether Egyptian, Mesopotamian, or Mayan, these cultures all around the world, no contact with each other, were all building pyramids at the same time as well. Of course, we have the Great Pyramids of Giza, we have the Pyramid of the Sun, Teotihuacan, Mexico, the Nubian Pyramids in Sudan, the Ziggurat of Ur in Iraq, Mayan pyramids in Guatemala, and even the Pyramid of Cestius in Rome, Italy, built in 12 BC. So how were these massive structures built by people who weren't in contact with each other? Well, by the fallen angels of Genesis 6:4 and their offspring, the giants, who were in the earth before and after the flood, and we know this through many other Bible verses. The Bible really points us to this truth in many different ways, and a few of these verses are Ephesians 6:12, which says, "We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places." Ephesians 2:2 tells us, "In which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, which is the spirit who is now at work in the sons of disobedience." That's a title given to Satan. So one of Satan's titles is the prince of the power of the air, the same thing where these fish-like god-men from the stars came, disappear and reappear in our skies now, and are even harassing United States military jets as we speak. But again, these same entities, how do we know they're of a fallen nature? Well, we can look at Luke 10:17. What does that say? "And the 72 returned with joy and said, 'Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name.'" So the same exact way that the 72 people following Jesus returned and they came back from casting out demons using Jesus' name, the same way that people nowadays, when they're being harassed and taken in UFO abductions, call on the name of Jesus and these things flee, proves they're of a fallen nature, and it proves that the fingerprints of the fallen angels are all throughout Earth's history and Earth's past. These megalithic sites, these same similarities in ancient art, all these different things, the star gods connection, these are of a fallen nature, and that's how we know, because these same entities, the only other explanation would be extraterrestrial, and people encounter these things still today. Many of these different ancient cultures taught that these entities came from the sky, these star gods, as they really refer to them. In South America, there's a belief that the star woman who comes from the sky taught people about agriculture and then returned back to the sky. Many indigenous people in both North and South America believe that people are divided into two different types of people, sky people and earth people in many cases, and it's believed that the ancestors of the sky people came from the stars. The humans of Arizona and California say that their ancestors came from the Pleiades system. In Polynesia, specific ancestors of existing families are alleged to have gone back and forth between the land of the sky people, earth, and the underworld. The Dogon are an ethnic group of indigenous people from the central plateau region of Mali in West Africa. They believe that fish-like men came from the star Sirius and taught them useful skills. Many of the Maya people believe and taught that the home of their ancestors is the Pleiades star system, and in Egypt, Sirius is associated with Osiris, Isis, Horus, Hathor, Anubis, and Thoth.
Physical evidence of alien intervention in human history is undeniable. Ancient astronaut theorists seek to explain alien presence in the past with ancient aircrafts and landing strips linked to India, Egypt, and Mesoamerica. Pictographs that were discovered in Egypt and Mesopotamia was an early form of writing from before 3000 BC, which described human interaction with these entities. It may be easy to dismiss ancient Sanskrit descriptions of flying machines or flying saucers as mere myth, but ancient writers made a scrupulous distinction between myth, which they called daiva, and factual record, which they called manusa. In the Manusa accounts, the most elaborate details for Manana buildings are set down. The Samarangana Chuchadada say that they were made of light material with a strong, well-shaped body. In the Sumerian language, there is a name that they gave for these extraterrestrials called Anunnaki, and these aliens taught the Sumerians and Babylonians how to build and manage these sophisticated machines. It is believed that this knowledge made its way to ancient India that can be seen in the iconography of some Hindu gods and some mythological accounts as being evidence of a possible connection to the ancient Anunnaki. The ancient texts also refer to incredible technologies like anti-gravity. This anti-gravitational force is what allowed the Vimana to move freely through space. The Vimana are mentioned in several other texts other than Hindu mythology. The Vimana, or fly machines, are commonplace in ancient Indian texts and describe their use in warfare. As well as being able to fly within Earth's atmosphere, they were also said to be able to travel into space and travel underwater. The Vimana were ancient flying machines that were purportedly used by the gods in ancient India. The earliest accounts of this civilization are written in Sanskrit thousands of years ago, where different types of Vimanas are referred to. These amazing flying machines were used in incredible battles resembling modern-day jet planes, hundreds of years before Christ. Today, many ufologists believe that the Vimana were actually flying saucers. These strange vehicles were piloted by otherworldly beings, and there was actual proof of them in ancient texts across the globe, like the Sanskrit, where the flying machines are mentioned in detail. In the Mahabharata, these incredible battles are described. Krishna returns the attack with lightning that locates and destroys his enemies through sound. One description of the battle is described in the following text. Gurkha, flying in his swift and powerful Vimana, hurled against the three cities of the Varishis and Danhakas. A single projectile charged with all the power of the universe, an incandescent column of smoke and fire, as brilliant as 10,000 suns, rose in all its splendour. It was the unknown weapon, the Iron Thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death which reduced to ashes the entire race of the Varishnis and the Andakas. The description of the after effects of this Iron Thunderbolt appears identical to modern warfare, where the many people who lost their lives were unidentifiable. The survivors fared little better, as it caused their hair and nails to fall out, pottery broke without apparent cause, and the birds turned white, and after a few hours, all foodstuffs were infected. To escape from this fire, people threw themselves into streams to wash themselves. This describes an atomic war. Other references describe other battles, where a fantastic array of weapons and aerial vehicles are common in all the epic Indian books.
What connection between occult activity and UFO sightings have you seen?
That are dealing with something beyond the space-time dimensions of the universe. We tell people, if you're having these UFO encounters, here's a list of occult activities that invite the demons, the fallen angels, to invade your life. If you get rid of all that, there'll be no more UFO encounters. But if you begin to practice these things, don't be surprised if you have these encounters. The UFO encounters will vary across the globe, much higher in France and equatorial Brazil than it is in the United States. Why? Because there's many more people in France and equatorial Brazil that are involved in the occult. There's a direct correlation between the percentage of the population involved in the occult and the percentage of the population that's having these UFO encounters. I'm telling people, if you don't believe our explanation, put it to the test.
It's important to know about the hierarchy of angels. Angels and fallen angels have different levels of power and importance. Basic low-level demons are around us all the time. The shape-shifting UFO demons are likely higher-level demons.
Flying right over our heads. Pointing it right at him. A nice turning.
Ooh,
yeah,
flashed.
yeah, you see him?
Yeah, it just flashed.
I'm lasering at him.
Some think crop circles are another example of fallen angel activity. As with UFOs, some crop circles are hoaxes and, in some cases, farmers have admitted to making them. However, the likelihood of all of them being man-made is not likely.
Crop circles have captivated the world with their intricate and precise patterns etched into fields. While skeptics dismiss them as elaborate hoaxes, a growing body of evidence suggests a more profound origin. The precision and speed required for such intricate designs exceed human capabilities, suggesting the involvement of an intelligence beyond our understanding. Crop circles exhibit scientific anomalies and unusual effects that challenge conventional explanations. Researchers have observed altered soil composition. The evidence supporting the extraterrestrial origin of crop circles is overwhelmingly strong. Many crop circles are strategically located along ley lines, energetic pathways believed to crisscross the Earth's surface. These ley lines connect sacred sites, ancient monuments, and places of spiritual significance. The alignment of crop circles with these powerful energy lines suggests a deliberate placement
with a binary code on it. Do you really think this could be done in a night? Just think about this. How difficult could this be to be made in a night? I don't buy that this is a hoax. Nobody really has proved this to be a hoax. But I think the message there is very important.
There's also at the bottom, there seems to be a computer disk and what looked like binary code. The message allegedly says, beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. There's good out there. We oppose deceivers. Conduit closing.
I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about for a long time, which is the origin of modern technology and science. Now, if you think about it, mankind was pretty much in a steady state technologically for thousands and thousands of years. I mean, there was no major advancement. Everything pretty much stayed the same. And then only in recent history was there an exponential increase in science and technology and understanding of the material world. This stuff is very, very recent in the last few hundred years. I just don't get the feeling that mankind could have ever come up with this stuff all by themselves, that they must have had help from somewhere else, from something else. When I thought the Lord spoke to me, and this voice of fallen angels who have taught mankind all these things, they have taught mankind all these things, and that the reason they have taught mankind modern technology is because It was a way to tempt mankind away from loving their creator and instead loving the things of the world. So that way, by teaching mankind how to make incredible gadgets and gizmos and all kinds of fancy machines and stuff, then mankind will be tempted to love those things instead of loving God. It said that this life is a test to see if you choose to love God or the things of the world.
If the intelligence of fallen angels was used for the construction of ancient tech and constructions, how much more likely is it that modern tech is also being created by fallen angels? I won't play this video, but I strongly encourage you to go to my playlists and watch this video. You should also watch this video, which I believe proves 100% that UFOs are demonic, not alien.
Could influential tech leaders such as Nikola Tesla, Elon Musk, and the Freemasons be the conduit between fallen angels and our modern technology?
This is why many tech titans, even many who are building AI systems, are scared to death of what they're actually trying to create. Here's Elon Musk.
If I would guess at what our biggest existential threat is, it's probably that. So we need to be very careful with artificial intelligence. I'm increasingly inclined to think that there should be some regulatory oversight at maybe at the national and international level, just to make sure that we don't do something very foolish. With artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, you sure you can control the demon? Didn't work out.
It'll be like summoning a demon, he says. Yet the big tech giants from Google to Facebook are all racing, trying to become the first ones to build such a thing.
Let's take a trip back to civilization, Babylonian kings and ancient Mesopotamia. Research inscriptions and read translations, the myths and legends, what's fact from fiction. Depictions of giants who ruled the land, double rows of teeth and six-fingered hands. The men of renown before the flood, when the angels fell to pollute the blood. They mingled their seed with both man and beast, and besieged the whole world with these circus freaks. They were drowned in the deluge, but once deceased, they became demon beings to corrupt beliefs. The basis of myths, these strange relations, the gods of the Greeks and the ancient pagans. They worship the sun and the moon and stars, and channel these spirits like avatars. From the Nephilim bloodlines from the fallen ones, the ancient hybrids and redhead giants have now returned like a deadly virus. From the Nephilim bloodlines from the fallen ones, the ancient hybrids and redhead giants have now returned like a deadly virus. Nimrod was the first after the flood to build a tower of bricks made of straw and mud. Exalted himself to reach the heavens, to be like God through self-ascension. Enchanted through mystical tricks and antics, he practiced witchcraft, the blackest magic. Commune with the darkest depths of the abyss, like elites and occultists within our midst. Enlisting dark spirits they know exist, and repeating perversions they can't resist. To be their own god, the first lion schism, the Luciferian definition, a false pantheon of apotheosis. The Uberman, Nirvana Gnosis, presented and channeled in pantomime through the mantis, the grays, and the serpentine. From the Nephilim bloodlines from the fallen ones, the ancient hybrids and redhead giants have now returned like a deadly virus. From the Nephilim bloodlines from the fallen ones, the ancient hybrids and redhead giants have now returned like a deadly virus. From the start of time until the end of days, there's no secrets to find or mysterious ways, hidden in plain sight, right up in our faces. Romans 1:22 repeated through the ages. Professing to be wise, they became as fools, worshipped idols made with their human tools. Fused science mixed with the mystery schools to manipulate DNA molecules. First fallen angels bred with human beings, then they were fairies and elves and changelings. Next we had alien grays abducting, now the new disguises inside our machines. These demons of old are well acquainted, back from the days when the blood was tainted. Invaded the earth like space invaders to corrupt the blood of our coming savior. From the Nephilim bloodlines from the fallen ones, the ancient hybrids hybrids and redhead giants have now returned like a deadly virus. The Nephilim bloodlines from the fallen ones. The ancient hybrids and redhead giants have now returned like